recognized symbol of excellence in sports entertainment.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 6 of That Was Extreme right here on adfreeshows.com. I'm Josh Shernoff from So Says Shernoff on Fight, and as always, I am joined by the quintessential stud muffin and the host of the 69-minute Eargasm podcast, Mr. Joel Gertner, as well as the leader of the BWO and my co-host every Monday morning on the Mind of the Meanie podcast, the Blue Meanie. Gentlemen, how are you?
Doing good. All things considered.
Yep. Well, the all things considered, I think, is we kind of called an audible here. We were originally planning to do for the anniversary of One Night Stand. We were going to cover the first ECW WWE ECW One Night Stand event, but then of course the untimely passing of Jerome Young, New Jack, as we're recording this only a week ago. So I think we all just kind of at the same time thought, let's dedicate this one to New Jack. Kind of seems like a no-brainer. So if you guys are ready, we'll get started. We'll talk a little bit about him, and we'll hear a whole lot about him from the both of you.
Ready as I'll never be.
There we go. All right, well, Jerome Young, the man behind New Jack, was born January 3rd, 1963 in Greensboro, North Carolina. In 1968, when he was 5 years old, he and his siblings witnessed his father stab his mother multiple times after he found out that she had been cheating on him with other men. 5 months later, his father shot her in the leg when she tried to leave and take Young with her. His father died of a heart attack later in the year. So right off the bat, not a great start for New Jack. He had a rough upbringing, to say the least, and something that he was incredibly open about and really shaped the person that he would become. He and his mother moved frequently across Georgia, usually from the research I found, was trying to kind of stay a step or two ahead of landlords seeking to evict them. He attended various schools, but he finally settled down and graduated from D.M. Terrell High School. I hope I'm pronouncing that right, in Atlanta. And while there, he had a little bit of success in football, backing up future Georgia Tech starter Daryl Norton on offense and starting on defense. He showed a talent for pass coverage and attracted interest from regional football programs like North Carolina A&T. Unfortunately, it was around this time that Jerome Young and his friends started robbing stores such as gas stations, sporting goods stores, and jewelry stores. And he was said to be an avid user of cocaine at this time. So let's just kind of talk about, what did you guys know? I mean, this is the stuff that's out there, be it Wikipedia, be it news articles. Of course, Dark Side of the Ring covered a lot about his past. New Jack's book as well. But what did you guys know when you first, we're jumping ahead a little bit to when you both first met New Jack. How open was he about his past before joining professional wrestling?
As far as I go, as you know, when you first meet New Jack, he's a little bit guarded. First time I met him was ultra brief in a locker room in Smoky Mountain Wrestling when I traveled to a show with a friend of mine who was refereeing, and I did the honors. I walked around the heel locker room, babyface locker room, introduced myself, and very briefly introduced myself to everybody in the heel locker room, and got the fuck out. But later on, when I ran into Jack in ECW, he was a little bit guarded, but as he opened up a little bit, he didn't really talk much about his past. He would just talk about life in general and stuff that was happening in the moment. He talked here and there about, I know we're getting a little ahead of ourselves. He would talk about the not the bodyguarding, the bounty hunting, stuff like that. He would share some stories like that. But as far as his childhood, he really didn't share that much.
Joel, how about with you?
Yeah, can kind of just echo what Meanie said. He was guarded. He could be. If he trusted you, he could also be quite open, like an open book type.
Mhm.
And he did talk about his past before wrestling, and he did talk about kind of his bounty hunting. He had justifiable kills. I think at one point he was driving around with a guy in the trunk of his car,
Who
and he may
hasn't?
have also done some time. I mean, I know he's got a criminal record. I think even in a promo, I think in Smoky Mountain or during interviews, he would talk about how he's quite a dangerous type to know because he has both a college education and a criminal rap sheet. So stuff like that. He didn't talk too much, at least to me, about his childhood per se, but he did talk about being on either side of criminal justice before ECW.
So, you talked about jumping ahead, talking about the bounty hunting and stuff. It's not really jumping ahead. I remember first hearing about that and the justifiable, was it justifiable homicides? Is that how it was
I
referred
think
to?
it was 6 or 8 justifiable.
Yeah, and I remember first hearing about all that stuff from his appearance on Beyond the Mat, which focused on Jake the Snake Roberts, focused on Mick Foley, focused on New Jack. And I think a lot of the times people, of course we were focused on Terry Funk and we were focused on ECW and Barely Legal and all of that. But I really think if you were to kind of focus in on who really had the largest stories, New Jack, I think, kind of gets forgotten sometimes that he was such an enormous part of that film, of that documentary. I'll never forget the line where they said that he's not Denzel, but he's Denzel's friend, when he was going for auditions. It was very interesting.
They definitely could have done forget a whole documentary about him. They could have done a movie on his life and his childhood and how he was book smart and street smart, at the same time, and utilized both to get around. I mean, yeah, he had his run-ins and stuff like that, but he found his way into wrestling, and wrestling was his platform to the world.
So at some point he decided, hey, it would be a really great thing to do, get paid to go beat people up. Why don't I become a professional wrestler? Do either of you know, and we'll get into who trained him and whatnot, but do you know what made him decide to do that? What was the light bulb moment for him to get into professional wrestling?
In passing, he's always talked about his love of Dusty Rhodes and stuff like that. Once he opened up, he would talk about wrestling and angles and promos. And I mean, hey, New Jack is one of the most underrated promos in the business. So,
oh man,
the fact that Dusty Rhodes is one of his influences, it goes to show the influence that Dusty had on him, because, when New Jack would, cut a promo, it was like a sermon, just like Dusty. So, he would talk about, stuff he liked growing up, with Dusty and stuff like that. But he didn't dive too much into his fandom, because I don't think especially, I mean, one-on-one, Jack was more personable once he knew you and trusted you. But if there's somebody else in the earshot that he didn't know, he kind of, would speak as a, like it was a deposition, kind of,
So he trained under Ray Candy. Any good Ray Candy stories?
Tastes like candy. No, I have none, other than I know Ray Candy from the After Mags.
Joel, you familiar with Ray Candy?
Just footage that I've seen, tape trading and stuff like that, but I have never met or worked with him or anything like that. No.
Well, New Jack knew him well by being trained by him. So Ray Candy, that's one thing we all know about you now. New Jack debuted in 1992 in the Memphis, Tennessee-based USWA, where he adopted the ring name New Jack, inspired by the 1991 film New Jack City. In June of 1993, he won his first championship, the USWA World Tag Team Championship, with his partner, Homeboy, defeating Simply Divine and holding the title for 2 weeks before eventually losing it. He remained with the company until the end of the summer, but after leaving Memphis, New Jack moved to Atlanta and wrestled for North Georgia Wrestling Alliance and won their heavyweight championship, which was surprising to me when I didn't know that he at any point in time had been the world champion of any promotion he had worked for. So that was kind of cool. In early 94, he paired up with former WCW enhancement talent Mustafa Saeed and formed the Gangstas, winning the NGWA Tag Team Championship in July 1994, but quickly vacated them as they left the territory. But it was in 1994 and into 1995 where New Jack started making a little bit bigger of a name for himself, working for Jim Cornette in Smoky Mountain Wrestling. Meaning, I believe that's where you just said you first came across him. He formed a wrestling crew called the Gangstas. He toured the South and was normally squared off against Southern babyface tag team, the Rock and Roll Express. New Jack's partner was Mustafa. But then in June of 1995, the Gangstas joined a little place called ECW. And man, it's I remember it like it was yesterday seeing them debut. They debuted for the promotion as a heel team. They attacked Public Enemy at barbed wire, hoodies, and choke slams on June 17th, 1995. Made their in-ring debut for ECW at Hardcore Heaven against Public Enemy in a losing effort. 1995, I'm sorry, I'm always trying to remember exactly when you guys were first there. Were you there before New Jack or after New Jack?
I was there after New Jack.
Okay.
I was
but
actually
a fan, but you were in the
I was in the
fan.
I was in the bleachers, hard camera side, not facing the hard camera, but on the same side of the hard camera.
Mm-hmm.
And I distinctly remember him hopping the rail. And Philly fans are smart. They know who he is. They've seen him. He had been in the area prior to that for Dennis Corluzzo.
Okay.
When Dennis Corluzzo had the NWA title tournament, when after Shane Douglas famously threw down the belt, they had a tournament in Cherry Hill, and Dennis Corluzzo brought in a lot of the Smoky Mountain folks. So I got to witness that show. I got to see the Gangstas versus the Rock Roll Express and stuff like that. So a lot of those same fans who would go to the Corluzzo shows would go to ECW shows. So
sure,
once the Gangstas hit the ring, there was that oh shit, because nobody knew it was happening, and
right.
it was so well done. It looked so legit. The fact that they had the cops arrest them and take them out the front door, where in today's whatever they would take them through the back, and it kills the illusion. But I was in the crowd for that, and then their subsequent first match.
Joel, were you working for ECW at this point when they came in?
No, I was about 3 months down the line in September of 95.
Do you happen to remember that time when they debuted, or did you become more familiar with him once you got to ECW?
I knew of him through the newsletters, believe it or not, going back to Memphis. I remember reading about him and Homeboy winning the tag titles there. So he was kind of on my radar. Not really. I mean, I'm sure in the Observer, there were North Georgia Wrestling Association shows that had their results, but I think he really kind of came on my radar with Memphis. And I remember the mid-95 stuff from watching it on TV. I was up at school, and we would get the Sports Channel Philly feed, and I would try to go just about every week to a sports bar in town that had a satellite so that I could catch ECW TV. And I remember him from that time now.
So the Gangstas and Public Enemy engaged in a pretty lengthy rivalry, trading wins back and forth against each other throughout the year, with the feud ending in a street fight at House Party, which Public Enemy won. However, Public Enemy then departed ECW after the event, and that was it for the rivalry between the two teams. At Cyber Slam, the Gangstas were scheduled to compete in a match against the Headhunters, but New Jack was imprisoned in Atlanta, and Mustafa was then attacked by the Headhunters. Do you recall what the reaction at this point? I think both of you may have been there, or maybe it still was before. But what would the reaction have been like backstage for something like that?
What was the date on that again?
I'd have to see the exact date. I know it was CyberSlam.
I wasn't with the company then, but it pretty much was the same, probably the same reaction they had the day Mustafa got arrested at the Travelodge, running up down the hallways after he smoked pencil shavings, screaming, "They all want to get me! They all want to get me!" And just like, oh, fucking Mustafa. And then I believe New Jack wound up tagging with Scorpio or something like that, just as a temporary replacement. But yeah, the reaction in the locker room probably would have been like, "Hey, it's good for the business. It makes them legit." New Jack comes as advertised from the streets. He's got street cred. It's not just one of these characters. It's just not like Kevin Kelly, the wrestler, not the announcer, playing nails, big man in the jumpsuit. New Jack was legit, in many facets.
He would return to ECW on March 8th, though, at Big Ass Extreme Bash to rescue Mustafa from an assault by the Headhunters.
Useless knowledge. Big Ass Extreme Bash is was a shot at New Jersey promoter Gino Moore, who was Dennis Corluzzo's right hand man, and there was like this little war between Dennis and Paul Heyman, ECW, NWA. From when they threw down the belt. Dennis may have been claimed to have deflated tires in the ECW arena parking lot, and Gino might have tried to call buildings ahead of time to get ECW shut down. So they had the Big Ass Extreme Bash as a little shot at Gino there.
Wow. It's very interesting. We are here for the useless knowledge.
I don't know when that factoid will ever come back up. I just had to spit it out.
Well, I definitely learned something here today. So what happened was when he made his return to save Mustafa, that kind of turned the Gangstas into fan favorites, which was part of what I think everybody loved about ECW at that time period on mainstream wrestling. Characters like the Gangstas were not baby faces. That was not going to happen. In ECW, that worked. So now that they're baby faces, hey, what else can you do but go for the World Tag Team Championships? So they entered into a rivalry with the tag team champions, the Eliminators. It's John Cronus and Perry Saturn, of course, and received several title shots against the Eliminators, but they did come up short. At Fight the Power, the Samoan Gangsta Party, LA Smooth and Sammy the Silk, made their ECW debut by attacking the Gangstas. Samoan Gangsta Party cost the Gangstas title shot against the Eliminators at Hardcore Heaven. The Gangstas, I got to tell you, it's tough to keep saying Gangstas, but that's it. Gangstas, the Gangstas. They then faced the Samoan Gangsta Party in a match at Heatwave, which ended up in a brawl between both teams. Man, you want to talk about just a ring full of some tough-ass people. The Gangstas versus the Samoan Gangsta Party.
A little bit of useless knowledge there. LA Smooth wound up becoming Rosie in the WWE. Superhero in training, all that good stuff.
Was that LA Smooth?
Yeah.
But LA Smooth was yeah, I think LA Smooth was Lloyd.
Maddie, whichever Samoan was Maddie.
Yeah, but
right.
Maddie was no. So the Samoan Gangsta Party, were there three of them when they? I'm trying to remember because I remember meeting them for the first time in ECW. I remember meeting Sam for the first time in ECW, and I remember meeting Maddie for the first time. I think, and Lloyd may have worked one or two matches or swapped in and out. Freebird rule. He was definitely around, and I know him from that time period too. But I want to say that the main Samoan Gangsta Party was actually Sam and Matt. And it was Matt, the younger of the two. Meanie is right,
yes,
who did go on to become Rosie. Lloyd was L.A. Smooth.
Yes.
So that's
And-
where all that falls in.
And
There
he
you
went
go.
on to wrestle for WXW and train people, the Wild Samoan Training Center. But yeah, but look, I think there were three of them. If I'm thinking back.
Well,
to
yeah,
it.
like you say, the freeboard rules. You
Yeah.
know, and eventually the demolition rules, or
Mhm.
whatever incarnation of a 6-man tag that you want to have. To hop back a second, you said the gangsters became baby faces, but I
Mhm.
think historically Philadelphia was always a heel town. Even back, when the NWA would come to town, and the boys in the back would be like, "Man, what are we doing wrong?" Like first time the NWA, Crockett came to town, it just threw off their equilibrium. We were cheering the
Right.
heels and booing the baby faces. So just the fact that the gangsters, became heels, became baby faces. Eventually, they would have been the baby faces anyway, just because New Jack on the mic, the music, the attitude, everybody in that crowd could relate to somebody like the gangsters. They were the Philly attitude.
So you mentioned the music, and why don't we just bring it up right now? Because anyone who is familiar with New Jack, the second you said the music,
Yeah.
they can hear it in their head. Do you guys know what the thought was behind never turning his music off?
Well, when they first came in, I was in the crowd. They did the debut, and then they had their subsequent debut match. I want to say they actually, before Natural Born Killers or Killers, they came out to Public Enemy, shut them down, and the crowd was just like, "Ooh," there's just this aura in the building of waiting for the gangsters to have an official match where they come down the aisle, sit through the crowd, and New Jack's got the big black, triple fat goose jacket with the hood up, and they're just walking to the ring with the swagger and the beat and the music and stuff like that. But then eventually, they graduated to Natural Born Killers, and shout out to sound guy Randy Holt, who did who ran the music for ECW. He mixed that song on the fly as the match was going on. There was like no pre-production of, okay, I'm going to loop it here, blah blah blah. He would have a CD on one side, another CD on the other, and he'd wait for a certain beat, hit play on that, and then rewind to that same part on the other disc. And when it came up, it was just flawless the way he did it, because you never knew how long the matches were going to be. And you don't want to end it on a weird note, kind of thing. So Randy Holt, sound guy Randy Holt, mixed New Jack's music on the fly with like 2 CDs.
And kid, our younger audience listening to this cannot appreciate. Like, I'm thinking about that, going, man, that is some talent to be able to pull that off in that environment.
It reminds me as a kid, like I would have like I go back to cassette tapes.
Tracks. Yeah, whatever.
Yeah, I would put one album on one side and another album on the other side, and I got your little fucking. I wasn't going to sell it, but
I didn't think you were going to sell it, but
you son of a bitch.
But you sold it, so it's going to keep on coming.
You motherfucker. But like, I would like, summer '94, it was Black Crowes and Nirvana. So like, I heard my favorite song on the Nirvana side, and then I would hit the button where it would go to the other side, and then my favorite Nirvana, my favorite Black Crow song would come on. And I would just keep doing that process, before there was like this such thing as MP3s and stuff,
Yeah.
So there was an art to it that these kids these days will never get. But
kids these days, so the gangsters, they had their feud with the Eliminators, Samoan Gangster Party, and the Bruise Brothers, which eventually led to a four-way dance, I believe is what it was referred to as. A four-way dance between the 4 teams at The Doctor Is In, which the gangsters won to capture their first World Tag Team Championships. They successfully defended the title against teams such as Samoan Gangster Party, the Eliminators, and Rob Van Dam and Sabu throughout that year, losing the titles in December of '96 to the Eliminators. I want to say, if memory serves me correctly, that actually aired after the new year in January of 97, but I could be wrong. 1 month prior to all of that, though, New Jack was involved in a little incident known fondly as the mass transit incident. That was November 23rd, 1996, which coincidentally was my bar mitzvah. That is not a lie. So anyway, what can you guys tell us about? We've talked about it a little bit in the past. What can you guys tell us? The Gangsters were scheduled to face Devon Dudley and Axl Rotten, I believe, and Axl missed the show for a reason that I couldn't find. I guess it was never made public. But New Jack said that he thought it had something to do with Axl's grandmother. He said that in the documentary Forever Hardcore. So Axl, either way, was not able to make it and was replaced by mass transit. Gentleman, real name Eric Kulas, an untrained 17-year-old who convinced Paul Heyman that he was 21 and had been trained by the veteran Killer Kowalski. Before we get into the whole everything that happened, we've talked about this before, and I believe Joel, Meanie, either of you or both of you have stated that when you would be in that venue, it was not uncommon for Killer Kowalski or his students to come by for a tryout to help out, maybe on like a ring crew or whatever the case may be.
That's where China came and visited. That's where we met China.
Yeah,
Okay.
China came to a show. Yeah.
Yep.
So, but on this night, nobody from Killer Kowalski's school was there. Killer Kowalski himself was not there. So there was nobody. Yeah, so nobody to say, yeah, I don't know who this kid is. To think how different things would have been if one student was there.
Yeah.
To kind of go aside and tell one of the boys, hey, I don't know this guy. And guess what? Chances are he probably still would have gotten thrown out into the ring with New Jack, just for lying about it. But the big thing that came from this was he requested that New Jack cut him. He wasn't comfortable doing it himself, and New Jack he obliged. If you want to go into some detail,
yeah, it's just one of the first things I ever learned in the business was never let anybody else cut you. And you could go back to watching old tapes I remember watching a documentary on the Von Erichs on a current affair, and they show Fritz with the claw on somebody, and the referee goes up and cuts the guy instead of the guy cutting himself. And there's been a history of letting other people gig you, but I was always told, you know your body better than anybody else when it comes to doing stuff like that. So I never let anybody else do it. So the fact that the kid requested it should have been a red flag that, hey, maybe this kid's full of shit.
I will say that I remember hearing from watching an interview with Steve Austin. It wasn't a personal conversation between myself and him. We mostly just text, but I remember him saying that he actually asked Bret Hart to blade him at WrestleMania 13. That's the story that goes around of like he wasn't comfortable with it, although I feel like he had in the past. I can't really say, but that's what I remember hearing. But now you're talking about two people who have high respect for each other, two longtime professionals about to go into a WrestleMania match, one asking the already legendary Bret the Hitman Hart at the time to do that for him to enhance the match, juxtaposed with mass transit, who no one's ever heard of, coming to New Jack, and according to New Jack on Dark Side of the Ring, not overly respectful to New Jack as well, or to the locker room as a whole. And I think and that's something obviously you guys can speak to far more than me. I only watched it on TV, but obviously there's the idea of don't let someone blade you because you don't know what the other person's limits are or whatever. But New Jack was very forthcoming about the fact that it wasn't an accident. what what happened there. So what can you guys tell us about the behavior of mass transit backstage and New Jack's reaction, and then of course the reaction backstage afterwards? Maybe Joel, what do you remember from that?
I would kind of run around, and I would kind of, I mean, I'm not stationed in one spot for the entire time, kind of just waiting for my spot, and then depending, like I'm kind of, even if it's sometimes just me pacing and trying to memorize my stuff, but I'm
Mhm.
always a little bit kind of in flux and in movement. So like I'm around Eric Koulas that night for little moments of time, but not really. I'm by and large not near him, but just between what I might have seen and heard, but largely more from what I've heard about it after the fact. I think in going over spots and going over the match with Jack, I think he was really trying to make sure that he got his own shit in a bit too much. I think he was trying to ask Jack for certain favors and for certain he was trying to have, I think, a little bit more offense than he would clearly be entitled to having, being in the spot that he was in. And I think Jack took exception to that. So, when you say not only am I going to get color, but you're the man and I trust you and I want you to like I'm going to get look anybody who listens to this I'm going to have I don't know. It seems like as the months and years go by I have less hair on my tongue, but I know I'm going to get heat for this in advance. But and I'm not saying Paul knew because Paul probably didn't know. What I'm saying is, and Paul probably didn't know, but if I were in charge, and if I, for example, would have known that this kid wanted Jack to cut him, with everything we had on the line, like our upcoming pay-per-view debut, I would have, as much as Jack would have loved to have had a field day with this kid, especially for him disrespecting Jack, calling the spots and working on the match in the back. I would have begged, pleaded, and implored Jack not to do what eventually wound up happening. But I don't think Paul had any idea the level that things were getting taken to. Because if I'm here, there, and everywhere, imagine Paul. He, you know,
Right.
he,
Sure.
he he's got every business to be able, you would think, running the show, to be the big boss and sit and be Paulie and have people come to him. But he's putting out fires left and right as well because the ECW is just that kind of shoestring operation. So, but yeah, I think the kid took liberties. I think the kid started to disrespect Jack in Jack's mind. So when he asks Jack to cut him, not just let's get color, I'm okay with getting color, but when he asks Jack to do the favors, I mean, if you ask the lion if you can stick your head in his mouth, I mean, what do you expect him to say?
Right. And the other thing, like you said, you weren't around Eric Koulas and Paul Heyman probably wasn't aware. You also have to remember, had this not happened, no disrespect to the late, Mr. Koulas, but none of us would know his name. None of us would remember this one guy who showed up one night at a show for ECW and wrestled, and probably we would have said, he wasn't that great, and everyone would have moved on.
That's the one
It's
thing.
because of this. So it's not like you guys were committing like you're like, oh, Eric Koulas is here. I better keep an ear out and pay attention to what's happening. Who was even thinking about this guy, right?
Yeah, I think that's the one thing I have with Dark Side of the Ring, which is to me is a phenomenal show. But in the New Jack episode, they said ECW invited Eric to the show, which wasn't the case. I think that was a little bit of Eric's buddy, the guy with the dolls, added that part in and fed them that line of bullshit. Because the guy who made dolls with dick hair. I had a little bit of a different take because I had seen Eric that day. I showed up to the building as usual. We do the pre-show, whatever, as usual. I go in the back, and they're at the racetrack. You know, the folks from the racetrack like to leave out, you know, a couple pitchers of water, some soda for the boys and stuff like that. And I see this dude over there in a blue shirt and, you know, the dark pants, and I like, why is the fucking security guard from the building drinking our drinks? Like he was over there drinking some of the soda. I thought he was with the building. I didn't know he was a wrestler. You know what I'm saying? And then word started going around. He was on the show. He had approached Paul. And he said, "Yeah, I do this bus driver gimmick. My ring name's Ralph Cramden." And Paul just kind of like, the look on Paul's face is kind of like, you know, when you mentally hit the reset button and you try to repeat the brain because you just heard the dumbest thing you've ever heard.
Control Alt Delete.
Yeah. He just Control Alt Delete, you know, and restarted his brain. And he goes, you're mass transit, whatever. Just go do the job.
Can we just speak for a second to how freaking what a genius Paul Heyman is?
Yeah.
The ability to come up with the name mass transit for this massive dude who's like, it seems like such common sense, but what an awesome name. I know it didn't necessarily match up with the guy, you know, and his skill set, but I think to come off the top of your head with something like that. But anyway, I'm just blowing smoke up Paulie's.
More of a massive mistake, but
zinger.
Woohoo! He was just batting 1,000. Like he sat down next to Taz and lit up a cigarette, and it's like, you know, it's just like, brother, you know. So he from being Ralph Cramden, he from lighting up a cigarette next to Taz. Then he goes over to Devon, and the gang says, "Hey guys, can I have some of my little friends join the match?" Like he wanted to. He brought friends with him. You know, we now refer to them as minis. And you know, he wanted to basically run comedy spots. It's like, no, and these should have been red flags. No, sure. You say you're Killer Kowalski student. If you're really Killer Kowalski student, we probably wouldn't have to fucking tell you that it's mouth closed, ears open. You know, ears and eyes open, mouth shut. Sir, what would you like to do? You know, because I was in a similar situation with Johnny Canine, Bruiser Bedlam. My first year in the business, I went up to him, and you know, we went to have this match, and I started making suggestions, and I had been trained, so like, you know, I made the mistake of suggesting things to him, and he lit me up, you know, but to the point where, you know, he hit me hard enough, you got me hard enough that when I got back to the curtain, he apologized and eventually got me a booking elsewhere as a make good. But I've been in that situation. So like, there's so many red flags with Eric Koulas, but we were a guy short. You know, Axel didn't come up. Like you said, you know, it was supposedly his grandmom was sick. He lives with his grandmom. He was taking care of her. And then later on in another documentary, he's like, "Oh, I didn't go because you know, they didn't give me a plane ticket," which I don't know what difference that makes. We usually drove up together sometimes to Boston. It's only a couple hour drive, so you never know. But back to the Koulas thing. Look, he asked New Jack to gig him, and think of New Jack's forehead as a brochure. You know. You know, just if you're going to ask somebody to cut, I said this in the ECW documentary Bob War City. I was like, if you're going to ask somebody to gig, New Jack's the Da Vinci. Just look at his forehead. You know, just that should be, you know, example one. Don't let him blade you, because look what he does to his own forehead. So, like I said, there are so many red flags that it should have been avoided. You know.
But it wasn't, and there was excessive bleeding. I will never forget the first time I saw the tape of that. A buddy of mine was like, "Hey, have you heard?" And I'd heard of it now at this point. But, you know, this wasn't kids. This was before YouTube. And so I had to wait until somebody got their hands on the tape of this.
I had the unfortunate, I had well, I don't want to call it fortunate, but I watched it as it happened. right behind the curtain at the dog track, there's a set of stairs to go up, and you go up like 4 or 5 steps to see over the curtain and see the ring, because it's like, Jesus Christ, what's going to happen? This kid's fucking heat all over the place. I was like, I got to watch this. I saw it happen, and then that night I stayed overnight at Gabe Sapolsky's house because I was running back to Philly with him and the RF video guys, and Gabe had taped it, and he's like, and Gabe was shaking up. He's like, it's the scariest thing I've ever seen. I was like, can I watch it? Because I'm morbid like that. I got a morbid curiosity, so I sat there and watched it in the actual camera, and
watching it just squirt out like was because you're used to. Here's the thing: you're obviously, you guys are in the business. I'm a fan who's seen blood, right, in wrestling matches, and I've seen excessive bleeding in wrestling matches.
The Muda scale.
Yeah, but this was like Muda mist out of coming out just squirt. That was not to minimize any other bleeding in wrestling, but this was, you knew this was not normal. This was not your regular situation. But so what happened? He ended up being hospitalized afterwards, received reportedly 50 stitches. New Jack was charged with aggravated assault stemming from the incident, but was acquitted. Kulas subsequently sued New Jack and ECW for damages in July of '98, but lost that case. Kulas would pass away May 12, 2002 at the age of 22 due to complications from gastric bypass surgery. Later, his parents tried to sue New Jack because they believed their son's death was caused due to depression and major eating disorder from what New Jack had done to him. Look, at this point, you're talking about somebody who's deceased and his parents, and not for us, I guess, to judge the decisions they made there. But obviously nothing good came from this. Joel, you had alluded to the pay-per-view that we've talked about. We talked about in the first episode of That Was Extreme, how that pay-per-view was delayed because of this incident. Obviously, the lawsuit is the last thing that I'm sure Paul Heyman wanted to deal with. Also,
that night I was at the current when his dad, Kulas' dad, tried to come.
Well, that was my next thing I wanted to ask you was, this was the long-term fallout. What was the short-term fallout? What happened immediately following this match? Obviously, he's bleeding like a stuck pig, and the match ends. The blood's squirting everywhere. What happens next?
At that point, we had our traveling medics, damage control, and they're running the back asking, "Who's got a towel? Who's got towels? Who's got towels?" And rushing out in the ring and putting compresses on the forehead to try to stop the bleeding. Jack comes through to the curtain, and it's get the fuck out of Dodge, basically. And he went out the back door, and within maybe 20, 30 seconds of him coming through the curtain and leaving, Kulas' father jumps through the curtain, where Atlas had, "Hey man, you can't be back here. Where's that? Where's New Jack?" or whatever he was saying. And they got him out, but there was some heavy shit that night.
Joel, what do you remember?
Yeah, same thing. It was a catastrophe, man. I mean, it was frantic. It was a crazy scene. God, somebody recently in the last week or so, I think Chris Cavallini, is that his name? He's a big workout dude. He's a big fitness guy, and he's on Instagram. He's got a ton of followers, and all the boys follow him. And he said that he was at that show.
Wow.
And he said that 10 minutes after what happened, he was online to get a pretzel. And New Jack was online behind him, 10 minutes after the mass transit incident to get a pretzel. And he was like, "Hey man, New Jack, what's up?" And he let New Jack ahead of him in line. And New Jack got his pretzel, and to thank him, New Jack gave him an autograph and paid for his pretzel.
Wow.
And that was so while the fire is going on and everybody's trying to put it out, there's New Jack being New Jack.
Listen, man, you got to
for
eat.
him, just another night. Got to eat. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Just another night in Glen Olin,
carbs.
Pennsylvania, except it's in Boston, Massachusetts, Revere, whatever. And yeah, man, just getting a pretzel. Apparently, 10 minutes after it all happened, I saw that on Instagram, and I was like, yeah, wow, man, I totally believe it. I wouldn't believe it if it was maybe anybody but Jack. But being that we're talking about Jack, yeah, that sounds just about right.
I want to believe it. So, what's the old saying? Don't let the truth get in the way of a good story. So even if it's not, I love that story. That really just adds to the overall thing. With his father running back there, you have to feel for his dad in that regard. He's probably, if you look at the son and how ignorant to the actual business he was, the father probably has no idea of any of this. All he knows is his son's going to do that wrestling thing, like it's for him, that had to have been a shocking occurrence. And again, like I said, you can't blame the parents for wanting to protect their son in that instant. But again, it goes back to everything the two of you have said, which is, as Joel, you said, you put your head in a lion's mouth. It's not like New Jack. It's not, no disrespect to anyone who played the role of Doink, but it's not like he was getting in there with Doink and thought, worst case, I'm going to get a whoopee cushion. Like,
dude, when I was a kid, if I wanted to just go to a friend's house, I had to leave a name and address, and they had to talk to the parent of the house before I even went over there. My folks, I had to be in before the street light, when the street lights went out. If I went over a friend's house, give me a name, give me a number, get an address. God forbid I don't come back home. Then they have this name and address of where I was supposed to be. If your kid's 17, he's going to be a professional wrestler. Do some research.
Yeah.
Look into it a little bit. Okay, you're going to wrestle. Where are we wrestling? Where am I taking you? Do they have? Let's watch some footage. Do some reconnaissance. Mm-hmm. I did more reconnaissance on neighborhoods I was moving into than they did on the wrestling promotion. They were going to let their 17-year-old kid wrestle on. Yeah. I go sit. Hey, I'm going to go move to this house. I'm going to sit in the car and just watch the neighbor. Do I really want to live here? So just there's so many things at your 17-year-old child. Yeah, this isn't like This isn't the school play. This is a profession. Do some research. I feel bad that man had to watch his son get an ass whipping, but
yeah,
I'm sorry.
No, man. I mean, look, it's not ballet. You know what I mean? Like, it's not meant to be fake. It's not meant to be hokey. It's not meant to be weak or soft. It's not meant to be fake. It's predetermined. It's not, and it's only predetermined. I think the two main reasons why the business is even predetermined is, number one, it's storyline driven. It's episodic. So it's meant to be controlled by the booker so that it can be sent from town to town and on TV from week to week. And number two, being on the road week to week, and back in the day, 350 days a year, you're pulling your punches so that you're not killing the guy, so that they can be well enough to work the next night. Mm-hmm. That's why wrestling's predetermined. Wrestling's not fake. So when you're going to say that what happened in the ring was aggravated assault, if it wasn't in the confines of a 20 by 20 ring, if it was happening in a street fight or on the street or in a restaurant because somebody said something about somebody's girl, it's all assault. It's all assault. When I took a vacuum cleaner to the nuts from New Jack, or when I took 20 steel chairs, or when he put me from the balcony of center stage through a table, It's all assault. And when you're taking these bumps, even like a Hulk Hogan leg drop, every time you're taking a major bump or a finisher or suffering any kind of bodily trauma like that, it's the equivalent of a car accident. So it's all assault.
Yep.
So if he's willing to be in there and nobody's forcing him to, it's not, he hasn't been abducted, he hasn't been drugged. This is something that he wants to do. And if he's further comfortable enough with getting color that he asks New Jack to be the one that does it, then to me, I mean, whether Jack could have held back and done less or not becomes secondary. It can't be considered aggravated assault because it's wrestling. And the guy was in there doing what he wanted to do.
It was consensual. And that's basically why I was thrown out of court when the judge said, you asked them to cut you, and they said yes. He's like, then why is this in my court? Basically. And
you asked someone to punch you in the face, and then you complain that it was too hard.
Yeah, for the record, wrestling's only fake when I win. So it's on the record.
That's what your opponents always said.
It's only fake when I win.
So believe it or not, New Jack actually had more of a career than just that one night. It continued on. At Heatwave 97, the Gangsters defeated the Dudley Boys in a steel cage match to capture their second World Tag Team Championship. I would have to imagine, Joel, that you were there at ringside for that match.
Yep.
Anything stands out about it? Nothing we've ever really heard of other than the Gangsters, defeated the Dudleys. It's what comes next, I think people remember most, which is Mustafa leaving. So, they won the championships, and then Mustafa left. The following month at Hardcore Heaven, the Dudley Boys were given back the championships, and the Gangsters had the forfeit. What do you guys remember? Meanie, I think I cut you off there. What do you remember about that, and why he left, what circumstances, and New Jack's feelings on it?
I was going to say, when it comes to the Gangsters and ECW tag belts, besides just being innovators with their gimmick, they were innovators of spray painting championships well before the NWO and Hulk Hogan decided to spray paint NWO on the WCW World Title. They sprayed a big old white X on the ECW tag belts. And it's another revolutionary thing they were doing. There was always, I want to say there was tension between New Jack and Mustafa, but when you're in a tag team, it's basically a marriage. And I would hear somebody going, a random mark or a random fan, whatever, would say, hey Jack, where's Mustafa? He's like, I don't know, he ain't my wife. Just stuff like that. Mustafa's a grown man. He do whatever he wants, stuff like that, and then later on I would hear the same kind of talking with, the Eliminators, when you hear Perry Saturn going up to Paul going, Paul, I can't babysit Cronus anymore, brother. Just tag teams, they kind of grow apart a little bit. And,
it's funny that you say that.
Yeah, I don't know exactly what the catalyst for Mustafa going, I'm out. But I don't know. It's just like, anything, Hall and Oates, any kind of duo. The one
I think it was Nash. Nash, not
no. Like singing duos, yeah. So before people out there take you literally. And,
and it'll end up on Wrestling Inc. Blue Meanie confuses Kevin Nash.
Blue Meanie and CTE.
Oh, God. Joel, do you happen to remember why Mustafa left?
I don't know. I got along really well with both Jack and Mustafa. I don't remember if I was ever privy to whatever personal or professional reason would have caused Mustafa to step away. I don't. Mustafa's a real interesting dude, man. He's real interesting. I guess he just I don't. Short answer, no.
I did it. I did a show in Los Angeles. I think I've told this on Mind of the Meanie, and it was scheduled to be at a wine and cigar banquet. And if they're gonna have like a random wrestling show during this thing where people in suit and ties are drinking brandy, lighting cigars, and all that stuff. But me and Stevie fly into town. We get to the promoter takes us a hotel. We're up all night. I couldn't sleep on the flight. I was like, you know what? I'll go to the hotel. I'll take a nap before we go to the building. I go into my hotel room. I lay down, close my eyes. I feel myself just about to drift off, and I hear a knock at the door. Like, I'm like, oh, what's going on? So I open up the door. It's Mustafa. Hey, Mustafa, you okay? Hey, what's up, man? And walks in and just sits on my couch in the room, and I'm just like, I was just going to take a nap. I'm tired, kind of. Yeah, anyway, so boing. Yeah. These nuts. And we just had like
it was a shoot, man.
Yeah, and I'm just laying there just like, hey man, I need a nap. Because I didn't sleep on the flight out there. I think I didn't sleep at the show. And then after the show, we were supposed to take a little cat nap and catch a red eye back. That didn't happen. As soon as we landed in Philly, me, Stevie, and then Rob Van Dam hopped in with us because he was on that show too. Drove to Jim Thorpe, Pennsylvania, made it to the building right as our opponent was going to Stevie's opponent was going to the ring. So we're basically taping up the paint on our faces on the way to the ring. But yeah, Mustafa, man, nap killer.
Well, there's a t-shirt for you. Hey, by the way, this isn't an ad. But I do want to remind people that they can go to prowrestlingtees.com/thatwasextreme for some great shirts, including one that says "not an ad."
Nah. It's a suggestion, not an ad.
Just letting you know. We're all friends here.
Friends. You didn't say anything about anything being on sale or anything being for a certain price or whatever. I think it was more informational than anything else.
That's it. Yeah. Not saying anything. Absolutely. And if and look, if like Memorial Day is coming up and there's I don't know, did Memorial Day already happen by the time this aired? Probably. But who knows? Yeah. Anyway, maybe the sale's still going on. But in August of 1997, you talked about Perry Saturn's issues with John Kronus. Well, New Jack and John Kronus formed a team called the Gangstonators.
Yeah.
This, of course, came after the departure of Mustafa and Perry Saturn from ECW. At As Good As It Gets, the Gangstonators defeated the Dudley Boys to win the World Tag Team Championship, marking Jack's third tag title reign. They would lose the belts to the FBI on the November 1st episode of Hardcore TV. But it was around this time that New Jack would begin to emerge as a singles competitor, which led to New Jack and Kronus quietly dissolving the Gangstonators, going their separate ways. New Jack also at that time was more frequently teaming with Spike Dudley to feud with the Dudley Boys than he was with Kronus. But also around this time is when New Jack began dragging a garbage can full of weapons with him to the ring and throwing it into the ring and using it. Do you remember where that came from? Meanie, I know we talked about over on Mind of the Meanie about how people would just bring stuff. Fans would bring things. You just collect random crap that people had and put it in the dumpster or in the trash can, rather. But do you guys remember the genesis of this idea that became so iconic of him bringing a trash can to the ring with him?
Well, back in the day, ECW used to have fans bring the weapons matches, and after that, they didn't stop bringing them. I remember, in the early days of ECW, there used to be a dollar store right next to the ECW arena, and same building, and fans would go over there and buy the frying pans and sit there and hit themselves in the head with them, and then hand them off to the wrestlers who would hit their opponents with them and stuff like that. So, to me, the idea started, as those fans bring the weapon matches, and they would collect them at the door, and put them in the trash can and take them to the back. Well, since they're already bringing the weapons to the back, New Jack took that as a inspiration. He had to get a letter. So and sometimes they would bring confiscate some real weapons, some very live rounds, and sure, you can have this back when the show's over. But yeah, just it all started. People would bring boat oars, they would bring Nintendos, inflatable sheep.
All really violent.
Yeah, well, that was for the Stevie Richards Johnny Raggedy Ass Ho match, and Johnny brought that in the ring, and because the whole thing was Stevie fuck sheep, but the fans used to chant at him. But yeah, it was just I think it was just born out of the idea they were collecting weapons anyway. So what better than New Jack to bring the weapons they confiscated, and then the fan in the crowd's going, "Oh, he hit him with the crutches I brought," and that would rile him up to bring more weapons.
We ran like Inkster, Michigan, and I don't remember if this was like the beginning of how the garbage can started, or if it was like early on, or like chronologically, I don't remember. But when I think about the garbage can, what I think about is this one show in Inkster, Michigan, and and I'll first talk about what was in the garbage can, and then I'll go back to earlier in the day when we met this person at the hotel. But New Jack's using the garbage can. He's got the garbage can. It's heavy and it's full of stuff. Boom. And out of the garbage can comes Joe C., Kid Rock's little friend, his little person, mini kind of. So Joe C. was in the garbage can. When we first met Joe C., who's a huge wrestling fan, and was going to be at the show, even he was going to make sure he was there in his town no matter what. But he was hanging out at the hotel, hoping to be able to convince somebody, hey, can we do something? I think he was trying to kind of go into business. And and he's hanging out, and I'm hanging out with it's me, New Jack, and a few other people. And we see Joe C., all like 3'4" of them or whatever. And when we see him, he's smoking, I want to say, a cigarette. And I think it was Jack who was like, I don't know, man, you shouldn't really be doing that, thinking he was a kid or something. And Joe C. was like, why, what's it gonna do, stunt my growth? I'm 27 years old. And it was just the funniest thing ever. But so Joe C. was in the garbage can one night, and I don't remember how early on into garbage can that was. But yeah, man, a lot of fun.
Yeah, Inkster, Michigan, where I famously shit my pants and threw my underwear on the roof.
Oh,
I recently,
wow.
I really recently did a Google Earth search to see if my underwear was still on the roof.
Have you done a Google time lapse search? That's what you have to do, because you have to imagine there's got to be at least one picture there where it's still up there.
Because that weekend was the day after New Year's Day, 1999. Because I drove out to Detroit or drove out to Michigan with Randy Sound Guy and Nova, and then from that show we drove down to Lima, stayed over, and then we had a show in Indiana, stuff like that. But Joe C., man, I don't know. We're going to talk about him again. I met him when I was breaking in with Al, going to shows, Midwest Territorial Wrestling for Gary Warncheck. And this kid comes up to Al, hey, I want you to train me. I'm like, oh, whatever. Like I was like, oh yeah, well, we'll see. Blah, blah, blah. And we walk off. He goes, how old do you think that dude is? I was like, 8, 9. He's like, no, he's 20. I was like, holy shit. And I don't mean that to be funny. I was just like, it just threw me off. And then so later on, our paths cross again. I'm in ECW. He's still in the business. He's with Kid Rock and stuff like that. And before the show, Randy Holt gave him the mic and let him rap pre-show. Like normally when the guys are working out in the ring and stuff like that, Joe C's like doing a little beatboxing and rapping in the building that night. So but it goes back to New Jack, kid, maybe you shouldn't be smoking. Just it would be like New Jack it would be like Sandman be like, hey man, maybe you shouldn't have that drink.
But isn't that wrestling though? Like, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, it's like, hey kid, you shouldn't be smoking like that. 5 hours later, he's pouring them out of a garbage can in the ring with all the wrestling weapons,
So New Jack would continue his feud with the Dudley Boys throughout '99, teaming with Spike Dudley And they would eventually lose to the Dudleys at guilty as charged. But at Crossing the Line 99, New Jack brought out his former Gangsta's tag team partner Mustafa to compete against the Dudley Boys, but Mustafa turned on Jack by smashing a guitar on his head and revealed himself to be the mysterious benefactor of the Dudleys, who wanted to run the Public Enemy and New Jack out of ECW. As a result, of course, Jack began a rivalry with Mustafa, which culminated in a match between the two at Living Dangerously, which New Jack won. What do you guys remember about Mustafa's return and the idea of and the two of them getting in the ring and having a match against each other?
I was in WWE at the time, but I was still watching on TV, and it was good to see Mustafa back. And be the benefactor of the Dudleys. I wonder if that was a jab at NWO and Ted DiBiase being the benefactor of the NWO. I don't know, but to see him, turn, yeah, it was interesting. It was cool. So you didn't see it coming. So
Meanie, you were up in WWF at the time, but Joel, you were still in ECW, and of course. You were there with the Dudley Boys. What do you remember of this whole thing, the mysterious benefactor of the Dudleys and Mustafa turning on New Jack and then them having a match with each other?
Mr. Mustafa. I remember the mysterious benefactor, Mr. Mustafa. I was just happy he was back. Glad to be seeing him again and working with him. I wasn't privy to any of the creative or any of the office about even why he was gone in the first place, and then also why he was back. I was just happy that he was back.
At ScyberSlam, New Jack teamed with the hardcore chair swinging freaks, it's Axel Rotten and Balls Mahoney, losing an Ultimate Jeopardy match to Mustafa and the Dudleys. Afterwards, Jack drove Mustafa through a table with a diving splash from the top of the cage. New Jack was out of action for the next few months until he returned to ECW at Heatwave, where he attacked the Dudley Boys with weapons from a shopping cart. Do you guys know? I know Meanie was in the big time, but where do you remember, Joel? Why New Jack left for a little bit? Selling an injury? Was he just taking some time?
I don't remember.
On the October 22nd episode of ECW on TNN, New Jack received his first opportunity for the ECW World Heavyweight Championship against Mike Awesome, but of course failed to win the title. But on the November 5th episode of ECW on TNN, New Jack rescued the hardcore chair swinging freaks from an attack by the Baldies, the Spanish Angel, Vito Lagrasso, Tony DeVito, and Vic Grimes. So this led to a lengthy rivalry between New Jack and Angel over the unofficial title of King of the Streets. The two would battle back and forth over the matter in a bunch of bloody street fights. One of ECW's television's most gruesome moments, though, was when in the course of a match, Angel used New Jack's staple gun, which he often used around his neck with a chain. He wore it around his neck with a chain. Used it against him, stapling him in the eye. Referees called off the match, and New Jack disappeared from the air for many months. Do we have any idea of why he was off then? Did he get stapled in the eye? Let us know. Joel?
I don't remember. Couldn't tell you.
Meanie, you want to make one up?
Well, yeah, he was just he put in his papers for a vacation. So went down to Puerto Vallarta. Yeah, went down to Puerto Vallarta and sipped on some Mai Tais and took some time off.
Well, he would return by the end of 1999 with his eye thankfully recovered. Picked up his feud with DeBaldi's, and at the Living Dangerously pay-per-view on March 12th, this is when, there are a couple things in New Jack's career that everybody can kind of point to as those moments in his career. This is the one where New Jack suffered some serious injuries during a match against Vic Grimes involving a bump that required them to fall, to jump and fall about 15 feet off of a scaffold. I want to say maybe it was even off. It was a scaffold by the fans, right? Was there like a balcony, or was it just purely a scaffold?
I was actually at this event. I was still in the W, but I was home to check on family, and I was like, you know what, I'll take the drive up to Connecticut, say hi to the guys, hang out. And the scaffold was basically next to the wall near the entranceway, and it was like right next to the entranceway, against the wall, flush against the wall.
So what happened though was, seconds before they're supposed to, both go, Grimes became reluctant to take this bump, and New Jack, who was, hey man, this is live TV, you can't, we got to go. Just grabbed him to go. Grimes went down with him, but it was a little. What's that?
He
reluctantly. He was pretty much pulled, and unfortunately, in doing so, Grimes did not go at the appropriate time, because, believe it or not, there is a safer way. Not saying there's a safe way, but there's a safer than other ways that they could have done that. And because of the way that this went down, he awkwardly fell about a half second after New Jack, instead of them falling together. So they fell off the scaffold, missed the tables that were supposed to absorb the force of their fall, and just landed straight on the concrete, with Grimes landing on New Jack's head. If you've seen this, I mean, I don't want to say go out of your way to find it, because it's kind of rough to watch, but man, it was, I mean, I knew watching this instantly something bad had happened. And what happened was New Jack suffered brain damage, broken leg, skull fracture, which he claimed resulted in permanent insomnia, and permanently blinded him in his right eye. I remember being I don't even remember whose roast it was, but there was a roast of a wrestler, and New Jack was on the panel. And I remember him getting up there and talking about it, and just completely shooting on the situation. And I remember him standing there saying about how he can't see out of this eye, he can't walk the same way anymore and all. And this was a massive blow to him physically. He spent about 6 months recovering. Even while injured, he still went on to have matches a couple months later at Hardcore Heaven and such against Angel. But Meanie, you said you were there. Joel, I believe you were there as well. Take us through that night. Maybe Joel, we'll start with you. What do you remember when they fell? Were you watching it? Did you hear about it? What happened?
Yeah, I think I saw it. And immediately I think everybody knew it wasn't part of the show and that something had gone a little bit wrong. I think they turned the house lights all the way up from kind of like show setting to just turning every light in the building up, so that I guess first responders would have a more lit building to work in. So yeah, it was, everybody knew immediately, whether they saw it or whether they heard the scuttlebutt within the next 15 seconds. It went around the building like wildfire that there was a problem and that Jack was hurt. Yeah.
What was the reaction as far as, afterwards? I don't really remember how hurt Grimes was, but what was the reaction when he returns to the locker room?
I think Grimes took a ride in an ambulance as well, because he had ridden there with a friend, and his friend was upset. He had gotten hurt as well. But this goes back to the whole thing of like, when you plan on doing a spot, be confident that you could do the spot, or just don't do it. You know what I'm saying? I tell the story all the time. There's my first couple months in ECW, I broke Sandman's ribs on the Moonsault, because I went up to the top rope and Stevie was supposed to play Sandman. I looked through my legs and I go, oh my God, he's out way too far. And I'm trying to motion to Stevie, move him closer. And it would kill the spot if I had to get down, replace, and then climb back up. And the crowd like, oh, bullshit. Now imagine being New Jack going up to the top with, Grimes on his spot they had agreed to do.
Mm-hmm.
And then the guy just, chickens out the last second. How bad would that ECW crowd react if they went, okay, we'll just climb down? No. You agree? You're going to go. Jack believes in going through things he plans out in the back. And I've been in situations where Jack, where he was like, Meanie, you want to do this? I go, yeah. He goes, are you sure? Because when I went back in 2000 as the Blue Boy, I worked a couple of shows with him, and he wanted to do the stable gun thing with me. And he asked me if I wanted to get color. I was like, yeah, sure, I'll get color. He's like, are you sure? Do you want to get color? And then
yeah, Jack, just why don't you cut me though? I'm not overly comfortable.
But word got back to Paul and Tommy that I was going to get colored. Like, I don't get colored, and then I was like, all right, whatever. But again, Grimes and Jack talked this spot out in the back. Grimes could have easily said, hey, I'm not comfortable with it. Let's not do it. And Jack probably would have said, okay, we'll do something else.
What? Look, I understand the idea that it probably looked a hell of a lot less of a fall when you were looking up at it as opposed to once you got up there and you were looking down. But
yeah, it's just like Cactus Jack talking about when he went to the top of the Hell in the Cell. Mm-hmm. He couldn't believe like everybody looked like ants below them. I don't know if this was the same height as the Cell, but I could see Grimes getting cold feet. But then again,
sure,
maybe do a run through beforehand and say, hey, let me just go see. They always could have scrapped the idea and done the thing where, Jack just dives on him off the scaffold through a table and stuff, going off with him,
but during the heat of the moment, they didn't have the time to sit there and have a conversation, and
right.
And have, New Jack's not going to sit there and just be like, well, all right, well, here are our options while we're up here on live TV.
Yeah.
Here are our options. We could work back down. I could do. So yeah, I mean, I understand why it went down the way it did, but I wanted to ask both of you, and Meanie, even more so you. One thing that struck me about this, based, if nothing else, than on the day that we're recording this, and on the anniversary of Owen Hart's passing, this took place less than a year after Owen Hart fell at the Kemper Arena. Meanie, you were there. You've talked about it on Dark Side. You've talked about it on our show. And at this moment, is there anything going through your mind of like, holy shit, again, not again. And obviously very different circumstances, very, very different. New Jack and Grimes had all the intention of the world to climb up there and fall down. And I think it's important to state that. But I'm talking more from hey, maybe we don't do this stuff where we're falling from these incredible heights. Did you think about that? Was it any, and today, to this day, both of you, we still see these big falls. Do you think that that's something where we need to just say, all right, this isn't, your body can only fall from so high before serious things are going to happen?
Well, the whole Owen thing was a total thing of negligence as far as the clip.
Yeah, and totally different. Absolutely different.
He wasn't planning on doing the fall and stuff like that. But here's a spot where, Jack and Grimes had a conversation, agreed to do this thing, and they were supposed to go like through maybe 2 tables, which would have, softened the blow, stopped them on them. So, it could have been, Grimes had every opportunity to say, no, I'm not comfortable with that, then again, maybe I'm thinking I'm the jinx. I'm there when Owen dies. I was there when this happened. I was there when Droz broke his neck. So maybe I'm the jinx. I don't know.
Yeah, I
crazy.
I don't think so, but maybe Joel,
Yeah,
if you should just finish this, just the two of us. But no, I just, the reason I bring it up is just because thinking about it, it just seemed like, and this is how everything is in wrestling. This is how it is in the world. You do one thing. How do we top it? How do we top it? So we go higher and higher and higher. And again, not at all the same thing as what happened to Owen Hart. Not even in the same ballpark. This was a spot that was planned to fall. Mm-hmm. But is there a point where you go, you know, we shouldn't be doing this anymore? That's 15 feet. That's 20 feet. That's 30 feet. It's enough. Let's, you know.
And we're here in the year 2020 where people are diving off things and going through barbed wire spider webs.
And Joel and I are here in 2021 where people are going, you know, off things. And
yeah, nobody, you can talk about it, but it's a matter of somebody's just saying, nah, I don't want to do that. I'm better off staying safe.
Well, nowadays you have crash pads underneath so that the internet can make fun of people for having crash pads underneath instead of falling directly on concrete.
Well, yeah, Joel, you have one guy, if you're going through on a crash pad, in a segment before that, you have to throw a guy down a flight of concrete steps. It's
right. Joel, what's your take on this in general when this happened and just looking at it all these years later? Do you feel like there's a lesson to have been learned here? I mean, how many times an independent wrestling has something like this been copied, myself included? Like, how many times has something like this happened? And how many more times does it have to happen before somebody realizes, hey, we can get seriously hurt doing this?
Yeah, such is life, man. You know, like you said, I mean, can you top this? You know, this has already been done, so we have to do this next thing. And, you know, it used to be that when somebody was jumping off of something, it was, you know, in the 80s, it was Jimmy Snuka jumping off a 15-foot steel cage, and eventually it wound up with New Jack jumping off, you know, 20-foot platforms, 30-foot balconies. You know, hopefully it does come to a certain limit. You know, you don't want to see people jumping out of the 6th floor of a building, or, you know, I mean, there's got to be a certain limit where you say, you know, it's fine to do what's already been done, because what's already been done is spectacular enough in and of itself. But that was just, you know, we were ECW, we were extreme. New Jack was, in his own way, the most extreme out of all of us, especially when it came to the jumping off of stuff. And, you know, so it's just a matter of wanting to give the fans their money's worth. And us, you know, we didn't have pyro. We didn't have lighting. We didn't have makeup and magic. And there was a lot of stuff that WWE and WCW had that we didn't have. So as the little engine that could, we had to focus on our strengths and just make chicken salad and just take from what was raw and fire it up. And you know, that meant people jumping off of stuff at the time. That's just, you know, those times, those morals, you know, it was like that at the time.
Let's move on here. The New Jack was in and out for the next few months. He made an appearance here and there, but he eventually returned to ECW on the September 22nd episode of ECW on TNN, where he rescued Spike Dudley from an assault by Just Incredible and Rhino, but was then double teamed by the two. New Jack was named the #1 contender for Rhino's World TV title at November to Remember, where he came up short and did not win that title. And then in his final match in ECW, he defeated longtime rival Angel on the December 17th episode of Hardcore TV. New Jack would remain with the company until it closed in January of 2001. Post ECW, WWE never seemed to have any plans to bring New Jack in, and I think for obvious reasons. His style was not going to convert to WWE. Although I do think that he would have been a great addition, and I don't know why he wasn't at the one night stands and whatnot. But
thanks to Tommy Dreamer, the day after New Jack passed, they had a tribute show on. Shout out to Busted Open.
Mm-hmm.
And Tommy, who was in the office at the time, said New Jack was slated to work ECW One Night Stand.
Really?
But he still had an outstanding arrest warrant in the city of New York. And they didn't want to run the risk of having one of their talents get arrested on live TV.
Wow.
So they had that. And that thing went on for a few years because when Extreme Reunion started running in New York, they did Philly, then New York. They had New Jack do an unadvertised run in because of said
couldn't advertise,
couldn't advertise. And later on, when they relaunched ECW, Dreamer's like, "Hey Jack, we want to bring you in. Did you take care of that thing?" And Jack's like, "Oh well, that." It's like, "Well, I can't use you if you don't squash that warrant." So the fact that he still had this outstanding arrest warrant in the city of New York City, a publicly traded company couldn't risk having him be arrested.
Well, that makes sense. And, but that's interesting to know. I'm glad you shared that because.
Yeah. Thank God I listened to Busted Open and the next day to hear the tribute to New Jack because Tommy opened up about that.
Yeah, and I think that's really interesting. I had seen in my research that he did a few dark matches for WWE in 2004. Mm-hmm. And so obviously there was some interest there. And now we know the story with that. He spent some time in XPW as well as, of course, the Indies. What can you guys tell us about XPW?
XPW was a revenge promotion. Revenge in the fact that owner Rob Black used to come around to ECW shows with Bubba Ray Dudley, who was a huge porn mark. And Rob Black was coming to the shows, and he wanted a little taste of the action. He was making countless. I'll say he was making millions of porn. Back then, he wanted to get involved with ECW, and Paul testing Rob Black said, "Well, maybe we can find a spot for you on the ring crew." And Rob Black did not take kindly to that, so he decided to start his own promotion called XPW, Extreme Pro Wrestling, and they were going to be bigger and badder than ECW, where ECW's logo had barbed wire in it. So our promotion is going to have razor wire because razor wire is more dangerous. In those first couple of shows, they actually paid guys to wear straw hats and Hawaiian shirts in the front row, and started booking all the ECW guys that eventually beat them up at Heat Wave 2000. So
I'm sure we're going to cover that on a future episode.
Which New Jack was at, and he was on crutches, and he was swinging those crutches and knocking the fuckers out. So,
during 2003 and 2004, New Jack wrestled occasional events for TNA Wrestling. Mm-hmm. The April 2nd, 2003 NWA TNA, New Jack, Perry Saturn, and the Sandman defeated Chris Daniels and the Harris Brothers. On the April 9th NWA TNA event, New Jack and Sandman lost a three-way match to the Harris Brothers. And on the April 14th NWA TNA, New Jack and the Sandman lost to Brian Lee and Slash. He then teamed with Shark Boy during the Hard 10 tournament, defeating Mike Sanders before losing the finals to the Sandman. On August 8th, 2010, New Jack appeared at TNA's ECW reunion show, Hardcore Justice, where he and Mustafa assaulted Team 3D and Joel Gertner after the match. Joel, do you have any memories? I know Meanie, no matter what it may have looked like, Meanie was not at that show. Yeah. Joel, do you have any memories of that, of working with New Jack on that night for TNA?
Yeah, the sequence got fucked up, and some of it I think was up to me, and some of it was beyond my control. But Just because of my line of sight, it was kind of this cue led to this cue led to this cue, and it was just step one was something I couldn't do to start off with, because if I would have done step one the way it was supposed to be done at the time that I was supposed to be do it, I would have been doing it with Mustafa being able to see me, as opposed to me doing it in a way that was, behind their back. So I couldn't do the initial thing without it being out of place, and it just screwed up the sequence. And I remember Jack being upset and thinking that maybe I was sheepish about taking the guitar shot, something like that. I can't remember, but the whole thing didn't happen exactly the way it was supposed to. And I remember Jack and I went back and forth about it, and it just wasn't our finest hour.
We wouldn't really see New Jack again in the public eye until around 2016 when he returned to the Indies. Unfortunately, around the end of 2016, he collapsed while walking home from a wrestling event, and doctors found blood clots throughout his legs and back. But he would return again for some appearances here and there, one of which I was lucky enough to be able to be a play-by-play guy on, which was a cool moment for me to get to call a New Jack match while that music was blasting. He was very limited physically at that time. And his last official match, according to Wikipedia, I tried to look up what I could, took place around, it says, April 2021. It literally says around April 2021, so very specific. I don't know if either of you happen to know his last match, the last time he was in the ring.
I just saw Bill Alfonso at Rob Van Dam's screening for his WWE documentary at the Sub Arena, and he gave me a poster from the last show New Jack did in Florida. I have it, and he's on the poster. Maybe we could throw it up on the screen for the video portion.
Yeah, let's definitely do that. Hopefully you're seeing that right now. Last year, New Jack was featured on Dark Side of the Ring, where I loved the fact that we got to hear his story from him.
Yeah.
Told in the way that you could tell that he was satisfied with the way that story was told. And that is so important, because so often, the story is told, if the story is told after the fact, person doesn't get their say of it. But what an interesting story it is. I definitely recommend that to anyone who hasn't seen that and wants to learn a little bit more about New Jack. We should also note that his final interview has been shared over here at adfreeshows.com, so definitely check that out as well. Guys, what's his legacy in professional wrestling?
New Jack's legacy is a revolutionary one. And that's not just because ECW was, our slogan was join the revolution. He brought an air of realness to professional wrestling. When you think of all the gimmicks that, African Americans were saddled with, he got to, just be himself. He got to be real. His promos were from his heart and from his soul. Somebody just shared a really good promo the other night on Twitter, and it's just him talking off the cuff, talking from real life experience. And those are the best promos. And you know what? New Jack could work, but the gimmick he got, that he brought to wrestling was what worked for him. That's what brought him to the dance. No pun intended, ECW. And that, like I say the same thing about New Jack. I say about Sabu is it's a shame he couldn't trademark some of that stuff, like moves and holds and stuff like that, because he spawned a lot of imitators. There's stuff he would do, and this is another thing Tommy Dreamer brought up on Busted Open. He would do the staple gun spot. And where it looked like he was stapling the dollar to your head, he would put a piece of gum on the dollar, stick it to your forehead, shoot a blank, and you'd run around with this piece of bubble gum dollar stuck to your forehead, and people thought he's like, Meanie, guys, I was just doing this as a work, and now we got people staple gunning each other for real. He spawned a lot of imitators. A lot of people didn't look like Jack, didn't talk like Jack. They didn't bring that element of the streets to the world of professional wrestling before Jack. And before you know it, everybody was coming to the ring with the bandanas and stuff like that, and mini Jacks and copy Jacks, and duplicate Jacks. So yeah, he was definitely a pioneer, and he can work his ass off. He can incite a riot just with his words if you wanted to, and it's a shame more people didn't. It's a shame it took like something like Dark Side of the Ring to bring him to the masses. I wish he could have had a run on a bigger stage as well, and I wish he could have went down to like the Performance Center as a guest coach on promos, because I mean he could cut a clean promo, just stuff like that. He could have gave. There's plenty left in the tank for him to get back to the business behind the scenes.
Joel, what's his legacy in your eyes?
Gosh, man. I don't know, man. I mean, Weezer, right? El Scorcho, is it? Right? New Jack putting Johnny Grunge through a press table.
Yes.
I mean, he's in a Weezer. He's all over the place, man. You can't listen to, if you're a wrestling fan, if you're an ECW fan, when Natural Born Killers comes on, you can't not think of him. Just an entire match long to the song, man. Just a soundtrack. Just using that song as a score to just have like essentially an action scene in a movie. I mean, he's out there essentially doing this Kill Bill shit where like 12 minutes set to music. Man, and then he had his theme with Bootsy Collins, and like, what's his legacy? Like Meanie said, he spawned so many imitators, and God, like if you liked him in ECW, you're gonna love him in Smoky Mountain. Just his heel stuff, just promo psychology. He's in Smoky Mountain congratulating OJ, 2 less white people that we have to worry about. He's in Smoky Mountain. Think of the psychology with the tag belts, and they show up one week, and only one of them, him and Mustafa, has a tag belt, and the other one is wearing a pink receipt on his waistband. Come to find out, he pawned the belt for money, right? To get money to do what with, and that's what he did with the Smoky Mountain tag belt. Man, if you watch that stuff, dude, Jack, for those of us who knew him, he was as vibrant and as lively and as exuberant in real life behind the curtain as his character was. He was just different, but always on, always living his best life, whatever New Jack felt that needed to be for him at the time, always doing it his way. Just on the cusp of almost being hard to work with, but never being hard to work with, and never being unprofessional, but never being easy to get worked either. Just always as open as he could be while being as guarded as he should be. Just really, really a complex human being and a great guy with a huge heart and a lot of soul and a brilliant mind for the business. And those of us who know well enough and have reason enough to miss him are going to miss him profoundly.
Yeah. If I could share one story,
please.
Joe remembers this person. I had a girlfriend when I was in ECW, and we were together for like 2 years, and then she decided she didn't want to be with him anymore. But she still wanted to come to ECW and be buddies with everybody. And I was like, man, that's kind of fucked up, right? She left me for a dealer down in Atlantic City and did all this sort of stuff, whatever. And so, like, Jack saw me, like, the way that affected me. Like, it really affected me in a negative way, where it was really bringing me down. I was like, man, what the fuck, man? He's like, Meanie, if you worked at 7-Eleven, that bitch wouldn't be showing up there. Fuck that bitch. And he went over to Debbie Beaumont, the ticket lady, and had her barred from future ECW shows just because he cared about me and cared about how I felt. Jack was a friend. He looked out for the people he liked, you know. A lot of people like to talk shit about him, but you know, he's misunderstood. All the problems he ever had, he never started. He just finished them. So I love him, and I'll miss him, and I'll never forget the things he actually did for me, you know. And he put me over. Not only I never won a match against New Jack, but he put me over in many ways I can never repay.
Well, I hope that I was able to do my part in doing this tribute to him justice. You know, it went throughout the wrestling world, all over social media. As soon as we found out, you know, Meanie and I were actually doing our show when we found out, and
yeah,
it's, you know, he was too young. But if there's anything, you know, with all the hardships that he had at times in his life, Joel, you know, hit the nail on the head that he did it his way.
yeah.
You know, he really looked like a guy who was living his life the way that he wanted to. At this stage, all things considered.
You think about a guy like a Bruiser Brody or a Sheik and how they were labeled as a hardcore outlaw. New Jack and Sabu are two of the last hardcore outlaws. They're, you know, New Jack was here, but Sabu's still here. But they're the last two hardcore outlaws that had that Bruiser Brody, I'm going to do things my way mentality. You know?
Yeah.
Any last things that either of you would want to say before we wrap it up here? I was going to ask if either of you had any personal stories about the Meanie. You shared some, and Joel, you actually shared a little bit as well. But is there any other, maybe one story about your friendship with the man behind New Jack, Jerome Young? Any stories that you might be able to share to give people a last little bit of a understanding about the man behind the character?
You go first. I've talked a lot. I feel like I talk too much.
Oh.
I've got a story that if you go to my Instagram at Quintessential Stud Muffin, you'll see the picture that goes with this story. But I have a story from December of 18 where Jack and Mustafa were doing an indie show here in Brooklyn. On the other side of Brooklyn from where I'm living now, but where I used to stay, near where I grew up, and I stayed with my grandmother for a while, and it was near where my grandmother lived. But my grandmother, for the last year or two of her life, was in rehab and nursing home, and eventually hospice. And about 2 or 3 weeks before she passed was when New Jack and Mustafa were not far from her house that she hadn't been in a year or two. That's where the indie show they were doing was. And I went there to visit them. And afterwards, Jack and we went out to eat at a sushi place that was me and my grandmother's sushi place. It was within walking distance of her place. And after the meal, I asked Jack, you know, very kindly, you know, my grandmother, quote unquote, hated wrestling. My grandmother, quote unquote, would only watch it to make sure that I wasn't getting legitimately killed, and claimed then that she was only videotaping each episode in case I might ever want to, like that kind of thing, right? Like she hated it. And
She was adorable.
thank you. And so we took a picture. I took a picture of Jack standing outside Yoshi, the sushi restaurant, which I knew that if I showed my grandmother a picture of it, it would be like worlds colliding, because she had only ever seen Jack on television putting me through tables, but she had gone to eat with me at Yoshi every couple of weeks. And if she saw him standing outside Yoshi, she'd be like, "Oh my God, what's this on?" Just, it would be a cool, I thought, photo op to show her. So I did show it to her. She was baffled by it. We did talk about it. and like I think 19 days later she passed in hospice, and me showing her that picture of Jack outside Yoshi could have very well been the last genuine time that I saw her smile. And I can't say enough about Jack, man. So if you want to see that picture and read that story, that's on my Instagram. But Jack was a foodie. We used to, on the road, if he had something good for lunch and he didn't finish it, he would bring it back to the building so I could have some. I'll never forget him, man.
Yeah, there was a time where we went to wrestle in the Belmar at Bar A, and I didn't have enough money to eat, and he paid for my dinner. So yeah, he's a great guy.
Well, that's it for us here with this show and this tribute to New Jack. I hope all of you enjoyed this. I hope that, as I said earlier, I hope we were able to do his career and the man himself justice. Thank you to adfreeshows.com for hosting us, giving us this platform to be able to do this. Make sure to follow us on social media at That Was Extreme, and individually as well. They are at Blue Meanie BWO and at Stud Muffin Says, and I'm at So Says Shernoff. Don't forget to check out our podcast. Joel's is the 69-minute Eargasm, and of course, you can find myself in the Meanie every Monday on Mind of the Meanie. For Joel Gertner, yes.
I know this is ad-free shows, and this is not an ad, but
not an ad.
New Jack's family has a GoFundMe. Go on GoFundMe. Look up New Jack. His wife Jennifer Young is going to be the beneficiary of it. Help donate. collarandelbowbrand.com has a special New Jack t-shirt. All funds go to New Jack's family to help pay for the funeral. Also, Pro Wrestling Tees just put up the first official New Jack Pro Wrestling Tees store. All funds go to his family. I know this is ad-free shows, and this is not an ad. It's just a suggestion. But
I think the higher-ups at ad-free shows would even be okay making an exception if this were, in fact, an ad.
I would kick myself if we didn't mention it, but all proceeds go to help his family who lost somebody very sudden. So, and who we all love. So,
just donate.
Well, thank you for sharing.
You won't regret donating. You may regret not donating after the fact, but you absolutely will not regret donating. New Jack gave his body for the fans' enjoyment. He gave his life towards the wrestling business, and he gave his career to ECW. If you're a fan and you have any disposable income that doesn't have to go anywhere else, please, while you can at this time, please donate.
And if you don't have the disposable income and you can't donate and you wish you could, share it. Spread the word. Send those links, whether it's the shirts, whether it's the GoFundMe, whatever it is. Share that, because that, in a way, is just as valuable as a donation. For Joel Gertner and the Blue Meanie, I'm Josh Shernoff. Thank you both for being so open, especially towards the end here, and talking about New Jack, the man. We will see you again next time as we remember more people and moments from a time that was extreme.